Now, war. Are we living in a pre-war time?
Well, the Defence Secretary certainly thinks so. Tensions are continuing to rise in the Middle East and war, of course, still raging in Ukraine. Well, yesterday, Grant Shapps warned that Britain should prepare for future conflicts involving China, Russia, Iran and North Korea in the next 5 years.
Britain has often accomplished the seemingly impossible before. Our history is littered with moments when we faced down the threat and we have triumphed. But looking ahead, we are in a new era and we must be prepared to deter our enemies, to lead our allies and defend our nation.
Well, I asked him this yesterday and he dodged it. He didn't answer. He kept it for his big speech at lunchtime. But are we all cruising for a bruising now? Are we all heading for a big war situation that nobody is really preparing us for? The fact that we've lent 20,000 troops to NATO for an exercise later this year in preparation for what? For Russia really flexing its muscles. And then all of these other countries pop out of the bag. China, North Korea involved there as well. Who have we to look out for? This comes as Britain did join forces with America last week, launching attacks against Houthi bases in Yemen. All of that's going on in the Red Sea, targeting international trade there.
Well, let's speak to military historian and defence analyst Chris Newton this morning. Good morning to you. It's being described as an inflection point. What does that mean and how concerned should we all be?
Good morning. Essentially, what we're entering is a far more dangerous world than we had been in, say, in the 1990s. You have, as you rightly say, different authoritarian powers. Iran, Russia, China, North Korea, flexing their muscles with different ideological objectives to the liberal West and seeking to overturn liberal international norms. And they're growing more belligerent, they're growing more confident in using military force. So we see Russia in Ukraine, we see Iran with its proxies, and therefore that means that the West has to get more serious about defence, has to spend more on defence. We'd like to spend money on other things, but defence is absolutely crucial. And therefore, what is important is that, and you say earlier that, are we heading to a war? What will deter a war is that spending, is that increasing sort of Western confidence in the world again, that will face down our adversaries.
Chris, is this an inevitable situation? How do you see this? How avoidable is this?
Well, the stars are aligning, and not in a very good way. You have Russian aggression in Ukraine. You have what's going on in Gaza and in the Middle East. Also, China's watching to see if they have the opportunity to invade Taiwan. And if we're going to now, I don't think anything's inevitable, and we have choices. So what will prevent the world becoming even more dangerous is, for example, Russia learns that aggression in Ukraine doesn't ultimately work. And that requires us to send more weapons to Ukraine. And if authoritarian powers learn that aggression doesn't pay, aggression doesn't work, then that will hopefully stop authoritarian powers in their belligerent behaviour in the future. But at the moment, the trend isn't looking good, and we are potentially heading to a much more serious, it's serious at the moment, but we are potentially heading to a more serious situation if we're not careful, if we don't take defence more seriously.
It's interesting to me that the Defence Secretary is banging the drum for more investment in the MOD, whether that is because there's a budget imminent in March or if he actually thinks that is the strongest tool available to him. Little mention of diplomacy. I know there's been talk about possible sanctions on Iran, but what about the issue of foreign aid as well? Our audience will be absolutely outraged at the thought that foreign aid could play a role in this. What's your view?
Yeah, I mean, they all play all of these different elements of the state, different elements of statecraft are all important, and they work in conjunction with each other to produce the strategic effect. So military force is an important component of diplomacy, but you need those other elements as well. Diplomacy, engaging with our allies, engaging, for example, in Ukraine, we do need more support around the world in say, Africa, Latin America, and Putin is courting support in those regions in order to get round Western sanctions, for example. So all of these different, you're right to emphasize it's not just about defense, but defense is an important part, because if we don't have the military force to back up our diplomatic points, then the authoritarian powers won't take any notice of us. So all of these different elements need to work in conjunction. And yes, there's also issue with the Foreign Office budget as well. The diplomacy has been, really neglected over recent years, and we need to look at that budget as well. No one wants to spend money on these things, but it's essential if we're going to maintain the security, freedom, and prosperity that we've enjoyed in recent decades.
Chris Nugent, military historian and defence analyst, thanks very much indeed for your insights this morning.